Hello, and welcome to this edition of People in Transition. I'm your host, Bob Durst. I've been hiring, firing, and mentoring executives, frontline employees, interns, and job seekers in companies around the world through a host of transitions, some difficult, but most very good. I work with people in Hong Kong, India, Australia, and across the United States. What sets them apart? A lot, but there's more they have in common. And one of those commonalities is transition is a part of life. This experience has given me a bird's eye view on a variety of trends, economies, industry disruptors, and transitions that are big and small. It also brought me into contact with the thought leaders and decision makers you need to meet, the people who can make the difference that matters to you right now. Imagine knowing exactly what to do next and how to know it's time to make your big change. The insight track you're going to access during our future episodes is better than a crystal ball. It's the exact information you need to take that next step. Whether you're a new grad applying for your first professional job, someone looking to transition your work experience into a promotion, launching your own company, or maybe even starting to plan your retirement, you're in transition, and this series is for you. We all know transition can be scary, but it doesn't have to be. And it's even fun when you have VIP access to the future you want. Are you tired of the uncertainty of being passed up? We'll share with you the tools and skills that can take your dreams to the front of the line. So, if change is on your horizon, or maybe just the thought of change, you won't want to miss this discussion. It could be the exact edge you need to turn transition into an amazing opportunity. Mark Herschberg, thank you so much for being this episode of People in Transition. I've been looking forward to this discussion for a long time, so thanks, Mark.
Thanks for having me on the show. I'm excited to be here.
Mark, when you were younger, what did you want to be when you grew up?
A combination of a physicist, a lawyer, a senator, and a little later, also a computer scientist. Those were additive, not instead of.
And what were the transition moments that occurred to you to take you from that picture of yourself as a young child to where you're at today?
There were a few moments that convinced me physics wasn't going to be the right path for me. That was some input from my physics advisor. Some experience when I was working our presidential campaign turned me off of going into politics. And while I did go into computer science and started as an engineer, there was a moment early on when I realized what would be really interesting. It's not just being a programmer. I want to deal with some of the larger issues, some of the management issues that you get as a CTO, a Chief Technology Officer. So I set my sight on that role. And I quickly realized that to become a CTO, it wasn't just about being the best engineer I could be. There were all these other skills I needed: leadership, communication, team building, networking, negotiating, but no one ever taught me those skills. So I began to develop them in myself and realized these skills are not just for the senior people, they're for everyone. So I began to train up my team. And as I was doing this, there was a very interesting moment where I heard MIT was trying to do something similar. MIT had done surveys of companies, and companies said, we want to see these skills in everyone we hire, but we can't find them. When you think about it, we've all heard about networking, but no one actually taught us how to do it. So MIT wanted to put together a program to instill these skills in our students. And when I heard about that, I reached out. I said, I've been learning it myself. I've been training up my team. Can I help? I'm happy to share the content I've created. And they said, sure, please come give us a hand. So I helped create the class, and then they invited me to help teach it. And it was that moment that led me on this path that not only do I have my career as a CTO, building tech startup companies and helping Fortune 500s play startup, but for the past 20 years, I've also been teaching at MIT and elsewhere. And then that turned into the book, the Career Toolkit, and the speaking and other things I do along with it.
And Mark, why did you write this book?
Having taught this for 20 some years at MIT, I know how valuable this is. We know this is what companies are looking for. We know it's not taught elsewhere. And we really figured out what are the key things, what are the key parts that you need to learn in these skills, and how do we convey them most efficiently. For years, I was trying to get MIT to expand it beyond just this class. MIT, of course, led free online learning. We were the first to put our content on the internet for anyone to get. I said, let's do it with this class, or let's expand this program, give it away to other schools. For various reasons, MIT wasn't able to do that over the years. So I thought, well, why don't I write up some notes for the students? The class, it's a very experiential, hands-on class. It's not a lecture class where we're taking notes. I thought, let me write up some notes for the students. I can share these notes with other people. And I really thought I was writing about 20 pages of notes. But 20 became 80, and then 100, and well, pretty soon I said, I don't think these are notes. I think this is actually a book. And so I turned it into a book and an app.
And Mark, who do you think should read this book?
This book is designed for people working in offices. I know that's very broad. So we are useful to people finishing up college or in grad school and about to embark on internship or first job. Very helpful to people in their 20s and 30s who need to really build these foundational skills to go far in their career. But we've gotten feedback from people in their 40s, 50s, even 60s who have said, wow, these are great skills. Boy, I wish I learned this 20 years ago, but I'm so glad I at least have it today. So really anyone working in an office environment, that might be a big corporation or startup, even if you're running your own business or a solopreneur, these skills, again, networking, negotiating, communicating, these will help all of you.
And what do you believe, Mark? What would be the 2 or 3 key takeaways from the book?
That these skills are critical to your success. It's not just about being a great engineer or accountant or doctor. Certainly you should know your functional area, but these skills underpin whatever your job is. And getting better at these skills, even marginally incrementally better, will have a huge impact on your career. Second, these skills are learnable. Yes, there are natural-born leaders and natural-born networkers. There are also natural-born piano players and soccer players. That doesn't mean the rest of us who aren't natural at it can't learn it and, in fact, be even better than the people who are natural because we put in more time and effort. So these skills are important, and they are all learnable.
Mark, I know in your book you talk about networking. When should people do networking?
2 years ago. Now, let me explain what I mean by that. People show up and say, oh, I need a job. Time to go network. So imagine the following. Imagine this weekend, you need to pack up your apartment and move. What do? Do you go out to a bar, meet some people at the bar and go, hey, yeah, you seem like a cool guy. Great meeting you. Listen, you free Saturday? Why don't you come over to my place and spend 6 hours packing up boxes and carrying them downstairs? You're not going to get any takers. Who is it who you actually ask to help you pack up your apartment? It's going to be your best friend from college. It's going to be the person you've known for 10 years, someone where you've had a long-term relationship. And you say, hey, listen, I need a favor. Can you come over? That's who we rely on. So when we go looking for some need, for example, a job, when you show up and say, hey, stranger, nice to meet you. Listen, I need a job. Can you help me out? That's like asking someone to come over and pack up your apartment. That's not a great way to start the relationship. You want to build that relationship over time so that in the future, if you have a need, you can turn to that person. Now, you didn't befriend the ones you have saying, oh, I know in 2 years I'm going to move. I need you to pack me up. You just think, I'm going to build a relationship, and maybe at some point I'll need a favor. Maybe you'll need a favor. It's about the relationship, and favors are just a bonus to that. So when you think about networking, think about relationship building, not about I need this now, and recognize that you have to build today for tomorrow. So while the answer of when you should network today was 2 years ago, if you ask that question 2 years from now, the answer would be today. So get started today, and your network will be there for you in the future.
And if you were to describe the key to effective networking, it sounds like it would be relationship building. Anything more than that?
I always go in with the mentality, give before you get. Whenever I meet someone, I want to get to know you. I sincerely want to understand you and know you and build a relationship. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, what can I do to help you? Now, that doesn't mean I'm going to show up at your apartment this weekend and help you pack up. That's a pretty big ask. Sorry, I probably have other plans. But are there easy things I can do to help you? Here's an example. When I was writing my book, I didn't know anything about writing a book before I began. And I started reading lots of articles. I looked at all these articles. There were about 1,500 articles. There were about 200 or so that were useful. The others, not so much. I kept a list because that's a lot to remember. And so I have this list of here's useful articles on picking a title. Here's an article on how to market your book on social media. So here's the 200 useful articles that I saved. When I meet someone today, and this person, she might say, oh, hey, yeah, congrats on your book. Listen, I'm actually writing a book of my own. Oh, you know what? I've got something for you. Now, I didn't write this advice. All I did was compile a list of useful links, but I send it out to her. It doesn't take much time or effort for me to compose an email, but I just found a way to help her. So our first interaction, she meets me, we talk. What's the first thing that happens? I help her out. And that's a great way to start a relationship. If you can help someone else out, especially if it is low cost to you. For me, it's copying and pasting an email. That's a great way to establish a good foundation for the relationship, because now she says, he's helped me out. He will probably help me in the future. He's someone I want to help out when he needs it. So focus on the relationship and think, how can you help the other person?
On the flip side of that, Mark, what errors have you seen in how people network?
So many out there. One of my big pet peeves is when I get an email from a stranger saying, hey, Mark, I'm just trying to network with you. Who at your company is the person responsible for buying this? Okay, that's not networking. That you can't find the right person, or maybe you're too lazy to find the right person, and you want me to do the job for you. Don't pretend that's networking. If you want to email me and ask that, that's fine. I may not respond, but I will at least respect you're saying, Mark, can't find this person. Can you help me out? But don't pretend that's networking. Likewise, salespeople. Salespeople say, oh, yeah, I want to build a relationship with you. Now, salespeople know that when you're buying things, particularly big items, as a CTO, I spend tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars at a time. You don't do that on a whim. You spend a lot of time investigating, kicking the tires, and having trust in the salesperson does translate into having trust in the product. They know this. They want to build that relationship. That's why they're happy to take you out to dinner and want to get to know you and do all that small talk, because they know that helps the sale. But when they are reaching out and pretending they want to build a relationship when really their only goal is just to close the sale, that's also not networking, because that's not relationship building. And it's fine if you're a salesperson and you just want to go out and say, hey, listen, I want to spend some time, understand your needs, get you to sign the contract and get my commission. That's fine. I can respect that. You're a salesperson. That's what you're here for. But don't pretend to want to build a relationship with me if your primary goal is to close the sale, such that if it doesn't close, if I told you I will never buy your product again and you're going to just say, well, you're not worth my time, then you weren't interested in a relationship. You were interested in a transaction. So don't pretend your transactions or your needs are really about networking.
Let's shift gears for just a moment here and talk about resumes. Mark, you've seen hundreds, if not thousands, of resumes in your career. What's the one or two suggestions that you would give to make a resume better? And then on the flip side of that coin, what's the one or two pitfalls that you've seen in resume development?
This is an important thing to understand about resumes. We look at them for, on the average, 10 to 15 seconds. I've seen some studies say even lower than that. A few might say longer, but I will literally, during my day, when I'm very busy going between meetings, say, oh, I've got 10 minutes now. All right, let me review some of these resumes. Either on paper, or these days we generally have them electronically. I'm just going to flip through a whole bunch of resumes. I'm going to look at 40 resumes at once. I go into the resume mode and I go, okay, look at this resume. Look at it for those 10 seconds. I make a decision. Yes, no, or maybe. If you're in the no, that's it. You're done. Not going to look at you again. If you're in the yes, You go into the pile, I'm going to bring you in, do a phone screen, whatever our first step is. If you're in the maybe, I'm sticking you there in case I don't get enough yeses. But really, you've got 10, maybe 15 seconds to convince me I should invest more time with you. And it's very important to understand this. Your resume is selling you. So what does that mean? You want to follow a standard resume format because as I'm scanning for those 10 to 15 seconds, I expect certain things. You're going to have the job title and the company name, and then below it, you're going to have the information about what you did. You're going to put in chronological order. Maybe your education's up top, maybe it's at the end. I'm fine either way, but I just know it's laid out in certain formats. When people break that format or they use funny fonts that aren't standard, all of a sudden I have to go from my look at the resume next, to wait a second. I can't just scan this resume. I have to invest time looking around, or I have to read this font. You're slowing me down. I'm still going to only spend 10 or 15 seconds, but now I'm wasting time trying to navigate your resume and not pulling out the information I need. So keep your resume to a standard format. That's the first tip. The second is I very much recommend bullet points as opposed to prose. Because when I look, I see here's a job, and maybe it's a job at a company. I think, oh, that's kind of relevant. Let me look at that. If I have to read even through 3 sentences, I'm scanning a whole block of text, and I have to look in that text for what you did. If you have it as bullet points, as I skim down the resume, I can see what were your outcomes, what were your sales numbers, what were you in charge of, whatever I need. It's faster and easier for me to pull it out. So I recommend bullet points over prose. I'll say one of the other common mistakes I see is resumes just get too long. They say as a rule of thumb, 1 page for every 10 years. I'm okay with a resume, certainly 1 page when you're just out of school, when you're relatively young. At some point, by the time you hit 30 something, maybe you're in 2 pages, I would have trouble believing you need to go more than 3 pages. If it's more than that, it tells me you can't be concise, and I'm probably not going to want to hire you.
Let's shift gears again, Mark, and talk about the interview itself. How can I learn to be a better interviewee? What should I do?
One of the absolute best things you can do is to become an interviewer. Imagine, for example, I said to you, hey, I want you to give a speech. We're going to put you up on a stage in a couple weeks. You're going to give a talk. What might you do? Well, you'd practice your speech. You would also record it and watch yourself. You might have other people watch you. And you might even look at other great speakers and learn what they can do. Now, some of this you probably already know. Practice. You've probably done mock interviews. Your school might have done it. You can ask a friend, hey, can we just do this practice session? Can you interview me and let's see how it is? And if you do that, I do recommend recording it and listening to yourself as you would with a speech. But that last piece, what the best speakers do is they say, I'm going to look at the other great speakers. What do they do? What can I learn? Whether it's changing their tone of voice or use of stage, I'm going to learn and incorporate that. When you are an interviewer, when you're on the other side of the table, you get to watch other candidates. And you can see, oh, she's doing something that was great. The way she answered that question or the way she conveys herself, that really impressed me. I'm going to make a note. I want to incorporate some of that. Maybe another candidate, oh, the way he answered that, he sounded super rambly, or he just fidgeted a lot in the chair. Do I fidget a lot? I better be conscious of that. So even if you can't be the interviewer, ask your boss or coworkers, can I sit in on an interview? Even sitting in on a couple and paying attention to some of these meta things, not just what's the answer to the question, are they competent, but how they answer and looking at how they conduct themselves in an interview, you can see good and bad habits and incorporate the good ones and work to remove the old ones. And that's really giving you a superpower when it comes to interviewing.
Mark, what are some of the different types of interview questions you've seen, and how can I better prepare for those different types?
You're going to get questions about things that you have done. For example, tell me about what you did at this job. You're going to get hypotheticals. You might get brain teaser questions. Some people love them, some people hate them. You'll get questions about your knowledge. If you look on the internet, you can see lots of different types of questions. Now, here again, I'm going to draw an analogy to public speaking. When you're going to give that speech in 2 weeks, what do we tell you to do? We say practice your speech. Practice it over and over. Don't memorize it word for word. You don't want to sound robotic, but know your speech. You know it so well that when we put you on stage, you just go into, okay, here's my talk, and I'm going to say these words, and here's what comes next, and they know what to say after that. And you're so comfortable with it because you've practiced over and over. The interview, for the most part, should not be a surprise. I'm not saying you're going to know every question out there, but certainly you're going to expect questions like, tell me about yourself. Describe what you did here. Tell me about a time you failed. We know what many of these questions are. If you don't, you can Google them. Practice these questions. Practice them when you're sitting at home. Practice them when you are waiting for the bus, when you're stopped at a red light. Practice them when you're in the shower. Whenever you have that downtime, think about, okay, if I'm asked this question, let me do my 30 to 60 second answer. Practice it over and over. Much like your speech, you don't want to memorize it word for word. You don't want to say, oh, biggest failure. Well, at first, here's what I did. You don't want to be robotic, but you want that story and you want it to feel natural. And by practicing over and over, just like for a speech, you'll be ready to go when you get that question. And you're not going to be surprised or have that deer in the headlights look.
One of those questions you might get is, why should we hire you, Mark? How do you think an applicant should answer that question?
You need to give an answer that no one else can give. Too many people provide a generality. I'm a really hard worker. Okay, great. That's what the last 3 people said. So you all tell me you're hard workers. How are you different? So provide examples, and these are examples from your history. They are unique to you. That's going to be something someone else can't say. Now, they can say they're a hard worker. You can say you're a hard worker. Everyone can claim to be a hard worker, but if you can give me a story that really shows it, I guarantee no one else can give that story. So think about your answer to this question and make sure it's an answer unique to you.
Mark, any thoughts or suggestions on if you're asked to do some type of test, like showing your Excel skills, your accounting skills, some kind of test in the interview process? Any reaction to that, and how should I deal with that?
Generally, you should probably do the test if you want the job. This is part of their process. These are the hoops they're jumping you through. Now, I do see some companies who perhaps misuse the test. For example, some companies, they put a 2-hour test right at the start of the process. So they're saying, hey, applicant, we want you to invest 2 hours before you're really committed to the company. You might not even know if you want to work there yet. They seem interesting, but you haven't gotten to know them. So the amount of commitment they're asking you to do, the test or pulling something together, should come at an appropriate time in the relationship. If it's a quick thing, then maybe, here's a 15-minute test. Sure, maybe that's just part of the process. And to be fair, if the company says, I know for this job we're going to be getting hundreds of applications, then yes, they need a way to filter it out. The test works because it filters it out without taking their time. They don't have time to call 100 people or do a first round interview with 100 people. So they do need the test, both the test itself as a filter, as well as see who's committed enough to do the test. So I generally feel, especially as you get more senior in your job, the bigger the test, the later it should come in the process. I will admit, though, especially for entry-level jobs where there's lots and lots of applicants, they may use the test almost as a weed-out factor. But whatever the test is, if you feel it's appropriate for the job, certainly it should be asking about something relevant to what you do. If it's a job you want, you're basically going to have to suck it up and do it.
And Mark, you mentioned the brain teaser questions like, why are tennis balls fuzzy, or why are manhole covers round? Is there a right way to answer these kind of questions?
There is, but only for the good brain teasers. So what do I mean? The question of why are manhole covers round, for example. That's a very famous one. And take a moment, you feel free to pause the podcast to think about it if you want a moment to try it yourself. Okay, now that you've thought about the answer, there's 2 generally accepted answers. The first is that it's really heavy, and so instead of having to carry it, you can roll it on the ground, but that only works if it's round. You're not going to be able to roll it if it were a square. Likewise, it's heavy and potentially dangerous if it were to fall on someone down underneath where the cover leads to. If it were, again, a square, you can imagine orienting the square, you rotate along the diagonal, it can fall through, fall down, hurt someone. It would also be heavy to carry up. If it's a circle, the diameter is the same. There's no way you can possibly drop it through the manhole. Those are the accepted answers. The problem with this, it is a binary question. Either you knew that answer or you didn't. And that's why I hate those questions, because if you in that moment didn't come up with the answer, does that mean you're a bad person? Does that mean you're a bad candidate? Of course not. It just means you weren't thinking bad. Now, the better brain teaser questions are ones where you're thinking about something and there's multiple steps. There's the classic one, for example, how many ping pong balls could fit in the Empire State Building? When you get a question like that, you don't just blurt out an answer. You don't sit in silence and blurt out an answer. You want to talk through it. And when we ask you that type of question, you can say, okay, great, that's a good question. I'm going to think out loud. So, okay, here's what I'm thinking, a ping pong ball, it's this big, and the Empire State Building, well, here's how tall it is and the size, and here's my estimate. And talk out loud. It's even okay to say, you know what, I was trying to solve it this way. I don't think that's the right way to do it. I'm going to back up. That's fine too. We aren't looking to see, did you get the right answer instantly or did you do everything perfectly? We're just trying to see how you think. So talk it through, draw things out on a piece of paper or whiteboard. But the wrong thing to do is just sit there in silence and give an answer. It's almost like on your college tests. When I was doing math tests and calculus, yeah, you want to get the right answer, but you had to show your work. And if you didn't show your work, there was no chance of partial credit. So here, by talking out loud, that's how you get partial credit. In fact, most of the credit is about how you're thinking through it.
What if you're taking a step down in the role you're interviewing for? So you were a CTO and now they want you to be a programmer. How do you explain that you are comfortable with this and not just filling time until you found another CTO job?
Great question, because that's certainly one you would get. They'd wonder, yeah, are you just filling time? Do you just need the money right now and you're going to leave me? You have to convince the hiring team that this is what you want, not just, yeah, I need a job, I can do it. You might say, well, I've been a CTO for years, I've enjoyed it, but I really miss getting my hands dirty. As a CTO, I don't get to code much anymore, and I'd like to do it. Or maybe I'm not going to do this the rest of my career, but I've gotten a little bit rusty. And of course, I brushed up my skills before I came here, and now I'm very competent about this technology you're using. But I really just want to get back into the habit of using it every day. And so I can see myself in this role the next 2-3 years just to get in touch with the technology and be hands-on. And then I'd probably move on and go back to a CTO role. Or maybe you say, hey, I've been a CTO for a while, but I decided the people issues, way too much of a headache. Love the technology. I was taking these roles because, of course, they paid more money going up, but I don't like that headache. And you thankfully compensate your individual programmers very well, so I can get the good part, the fun of the technology and good compensation without that headache. Whatever your reason, you want to make it very clear, and the reason can't just be, I need the job or I need the money.
What if the person you're interviewing with is significantly different than you somehow? So significantly older, let's say, or significantly younger, or some difference that is really marked. Do you conduct the interview any differently?
I might not conduct it differently, but I might behave differently. For example, if I were chatting with someone in his 50s, I'm probably not going to make references to memes and social media. He might be well aware of memes and social media, but maybe not. Whereas someone who's 20, statistically speaking, she's probably going to be much more up to date on the latest memes and active on social media. And so actually 20 might have even jumped too far because now the trend is showing otherwise. But just be aware of the context and habits. Now, that's a little bit of a stereotype. Again, not every 50-year-old or 20-year-old happens to follow the statistical norm. But be aware, and references you use, stories you use, examples you use, try to use ones that are relevant to the other person.
Mark, let's do a lightning round. And by that, I mean, I'm going to give you some items. And if you could kind of keep your response to 10, 15 seconds. Dress for the interview.
It's better to overdress than underdress. What you can do is look at pictures on the social media feed of the company and see how people are dressed at the office. That's easier when people are in offices, and then make sure you're a little above how they're dressing.
The type of voice message you have on your cell phone.
I don't think it makes a big difference as long as it's not something, hey, dude, I'm still hungover from last night, leave a message. As long as it's not something totally inappropriate like that, I think it's fine if it's just your name or a simple message.
Boy, I've got to change my voice message now. Thank you notes after the interview.
I very much recommend sending them. These days, just about everyone does it by email, and that's fine. You don't have to do a handwritten note. But sending them out and sending individual ones. Don't just send it to all 4 people in the 2 line. Sending 4, even if they're effectively the same thing copied and pasted, sending individually makes a big difference.
Having questions for the interview team well thought out in advance.
If you don't, it makes me think you're either not interested in the company or just not good at thinking through the future. So have these questions. You can use generic ones. You can use things that you could ask of just about any company. That's fine. But you definitely want to have some of those ahead of time. If you're not sure what to use, go do a web search ahead of time, find someone, and try it out. If you use the same question at 5 different companies, you're going to find different answers. That's going to help you decide which company might be the best fit for you.
How do you discuss the pay situation for jobs?
You generally want to do that at the end. A mistake I've seen people make, and admittedly, I even made this mistake once when I was young, was bringing it up far too early in the process. I would typically wait for them to bring it up, and then I'm going to respond to what they say.
How do you turn down an offer knowing that someday that company might be a place that you're interested in?
I always tell companies and candidates, jobs are short, careers are long. And so recognize that this is just about the job. It's not about the future and any even relationship we might have. When you're turning down the job, you can say, thank you very much. I really appreciate the offer. And do show that you were sincere, that you were interested, but then mention you have another opportunity that's a better fit. They know it's not personal. They might be disappointed, especially if it's an early stage startup and they're really hoping to get you, but they understand this isn't personal. As long as you're polite and you thank them for their time and you show that you were sincere in your pursuit of the job, I think it's totally fine.
Mark, any other books or other resources that you would recommend to someone going through a job transition?
I have a whole bunch at my website, thecareertoolkitbook.com. So on that site, not only can you learn more about my book or get in touch with me and follow me on social media, there is a free app, and I link to where it is on the Android and iPhone store that has lots of great tips from the book. There's also a resources page I have. There I list dozens of other books that I recommend if you want to go further on some of the topics in mine or pick up some other topics that I found useful. I link to a number of free online resources that will help you further develop your skills and explore some of the areas I talk about. And I have a bunch of free downloads, all of this on the resources page, and it can be found on my website, thecareertoolkitbook.com.
Mark, if our listeners only remember 3 things as they go through their transition, what are those 3 things you want them to take away?
When you're transitioning, have a clear target to where you're going and map back a path to get there. You can't just hope. You actually have to create a plan to go from where you are to where you want to be. Second, the skills that we talk about in the book, leadership, negotiating, networking, communicating, just getting a little bit better at these skills. We're not talking about being world class, just getting a little bit better is going to give you a massive return on your time. It's going to really help your career, help your success, help you financially. So invest in these skills early and often, even if it's just a little bit. And third, remember that all of these skills are learnable. There might be people who are naturally good at them, but it doesn't mean the rest of us can't learn to be as good or even better if we just put in a little regular effort.
Mark, thank you so much for your time today. You gave so much insight into the recruiting process, so much value in terms of the tips and techniques on how to be more efficient and effective at it. And you can tell that you really do care, that you want people to get better at these skills and to be successful in their interviewing pursuits. Thank you, Mark, for your time.
Thanks so much for having me on the show.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast. We're working in unprecedented times as the world responds to the recent COVID-19 crisis. The fact is that even those who are not in transition understand it could be right around the corner, next month or a year from now. The purpose of these episodes are to give listeners support and the critical tools to adjust with the winds, wherever they come. I'll continue to introduce you to guests who have successfully, perhaps gracefully or without too many battle scars, survived their own obstacle courses and can share useful information on how to steady your ship or your world in this uncertainty. If today's message was helpful to you, please share it on social media. If you have any questions or podcast ideas for future conversations, reach out to me on LinkedIn. I appreciate your time you're investing in sharing these important conversations with me, my guests, and others who are going through life transition. Transitions between jobs, life stages, new entrepreneurial ventures, or whatever life brings. Change is constant. The more prepared you are for it, the better and easier the change will occur. Thank you again. This is your host, Bob Gerst. See you at our next episode of People in Transition.